I've heard and experienced the glories of Radha Giridhari's devotees for many years, so I'm very happy that they finally let me come and have darshan. And oh, Hare Krishna, Prabhu. I was excited because you were in it, so. We'll sing Jai Radha Madhava and then try to share something from the Srimad Bhagavatam. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Thanks for Rama, Hare Rama. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Srila Prabhupada. Nitai Gaur Haribo, 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 Nitai Gauranga Haribo. Shri Radha Madhava ki jai, Shri Radha Kunj Bihari ki jai, Shri Radha Giri Gari ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. 16, I believe. 6:1:16? Okay. Oh, okay, great. And well, while the verse is on its way, I'll just take the chance to ask for blessings from the seniors especially. I'm very, again, happy to be here in Radhagiri Dhari's Dham after hearing the glories and experiencing the glories of their devotees for many years. So, Bhajan Ryan Maharaj, Dravida Prabhu, and Vijay Prabhu especially, please give me some encouragement that I can survive this in your presence. Yeah. I'm not sure. I haven't been there in 10 days. As you know, a lot can happen in 10 days. I don't have the up-to-date, but maybe since I haven't heard anything, that means it's all okay. Actually, right now, we can say confidently that the devotees are out on Harinam. So if everyone can say a small prayer that the Harinam is successful. University of Michigan, where Maharaj spent some time in Ann Arbor, they have 6 home football games every year. And so those are our big highlight Harinams of the season in the fall, just before winter hits and nobody wants to go outside anymore. And there's nobody outside anyway. We have these big blowout Harinams on the Saturdays where there's home games. So today happens to be one of those days. So the devotees are out, right? It's 11 o'clock, which is an hour before game time. It's peak time. There's core folks, there's about 40. And then Metro Detroit, there's 2 other congregations. There's Farmington Hills Temple and Detroit Temple. So amongst us all, there's probably 350 or so core devotees. And we've been there in Ypsilanti for going on 11 years now. Yeah, right about now, the Harinam is going up to the stadium, and then we'll turn around and we go back down through the sea of people. And at that time, I like to think about the cowherd boys running into Aghasura's mouth. Because that's kind of what it feels like. You're descending into this pit of something unwholesome, but somehow the presence of the Harinam makes it wholesome. And the people now, as you've probably experienced when you do Harinam in one place for a long time, they come around and they start to appreciate the presence of the devotees, and they give their little Hare Krishna and their high five and their Hari Bol. And so that's happening right about now. So everybody say a prayer that the devotees can be successful in their Harinam endeavors today. So, so we can chant the verse now. It's here. Oh, didn't change the verse. Okay, okay. Just the number is off. Everything else is accurate. Natata hi aghavan rajan puyeta tapa adhibhi yatha krishnarpita pranhas tatpurusha nishevhaya natata hi aghavan rajan puyeta tapa adhibhi yatha krishnarpita pranhas tatpurusha nishevhaya. Anyone would like to chant? Natatahi agavhan rajan puyeta tapa adhibhi yatha krishnarpita pranas tatpurusha nishevaya. Natatahi agavhan rajan puyeta tapa adhibhi yatha krishnarpita pranas tatpurusha nishevaya. Natatahi agavhan rajan puyeta tapa adhibhi yatha krishnarpita pranas tatpurusha nishevhaya. Na, not, tataha. So much. He. Certainly. Agavan. A man full of sinful activities. There's Agasura. Rajan. O king. Puyeta. Can become purified. Tapa adibi. By executing the principles of austerity, penance, brahmacharya, and other purifying processes. Yata. As much as Krishna arpita prana, the devotee whose life is fully Krishna conscious. Tat purusha nishevaya. By engaging his life in the service of Krishna's representative. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. My dear King, if a sinful person engages in the service of a bona fide devotee of the Lord and thus learns how to dedicate his life unto the lotus feet of Krishna, he can be completely purified. One cannot be purified merely by undergoing austerity, penance, brahmacharya, and the other methods of atonement I have previously described. Purport. Tat Purusha refers to a preacher of Krishna consciousness, such as the spiritual master. Srila Narottam Das Thakur has said, Chadiya Vaiṣṇava Nistara Payeche Keba. Without serving a bona fide spiritual master, an ideal Vaishnav who can be delivered from the clutches of Maya. This idea is also expressed in many other places. Srimad Bhagavatam, 5th Canto, Chapter 5, Text 2 says, mahātma-sevā tvaram ahurvumukte. If one desires liberation from the clutches of Maya, one must associate with a pure devotee, mahatma. A mahatma is one who engages 24 hours daily in the loving service of the Lord. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Chapter 9, Text 13, mahatmanastu mam partha daivam prakritim ashrita bhajantyananya manaso yatva bhutadim abhyayam. O son of Pritha, those who are not deluded, the great souls, are under the protection of the divine nature. They are fully engaged in devotional service because they know me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, original and inexhaustible. Thus, the symptom of a mahatma is that he has no engagement other than the service to Krishna. One must render service to a Vaiṣṇava in order to get freed from sinful reactions, revive one's original Krishna consciousness, and be trained in how to love Krishna. This is the result of mahātma-sevā. Of course, if one engages in the service of a pure devotee, the reactions of one's sinful life are vanquished automatically. Devotional service is necessary not to drive away an insignificant stock of sins, but to awaken our dormant love for Krishna. As fog is vanquished at the glimpse of sunlight, one's sinful reactions are automatically vanquished as soon as one begins serving a pure devotee. No separate endeavor is required. The word Krishnarpita prana refers to a devotee who dedicates his life to serving Krishna, not to being saved from the path of hellish life. A devotee is Narayana Parayana, or Vasudeva Parayana, which means that the path of Vasudeva, or the devotional path, is his life and soul. Narayana Para Sarvena Kutaschana Bhibyati. It's from 6th Canto, Chapter 17, Text 28. Such a devotee is not afraid of going anywhere. There is a path toward liberation in the higher planetary systems and a path toward the hellish planets, but a Narayana Para devotee is unafraid wherever he is sent. He simply wants to remember Krishna, wherever he may be. Such a devotee is unconcerned with hell and heaven. He is simply attached to rendering service to Krishna. When a devotee is put into hellish conditions, he accepts them as Krishna's mercy. Tattenu kampam shushamiksham hana, from Bhagavatam, 10th Canto, 14th Chapter, Text 8. He does not protest, "Oh, I am such a great devotee of Krishna. Why have I been put into this misery?" Instead, he thinks this is Krishna's mercy. Such an attitude is possible for a devotee who engages in the service of Krishna's representative. This is the secret of success. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityan Hamine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare Shri Chaitanya Prasadena Tadrupa Sivanirnayam Balupi Kurate Shastram Jusra Praja Vilasani. part of my conversion experience to Krishna consciousness was first believing in this possibility of God. And I remember where I was the first time I kind of fully accepted that idea in my life, aside from the kind of sentiment you have as a child when you're innocent and you can't question the mess around you. I was in the stacks of the library at North Carolina State University. I don't know if students know what stacks are anymore because they just have the internet. Dravida Prabhu knows what stacks are. Yeah, that's right. This particular building, they built it without considering the weight of the stacks. So there was always this question that perhaps it would collapse. It was a huge library, 9 stories tall. And this was in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I was up in the 7th floor looking out the window reading C.S. Lewis's autobiography called Surprised by Joy. And I was appreciated it later on as I met the devotees and I became a little cultured in what it means to be a devotee. You learn that the devotees are a little apprehensive about speaking of themselves. They don't like to talk about themselves too much. They don't like to call attention to their own behavior because there's a natural humility when you have love of God. And so I appreciated what C.S. Lewis had done in sharing his conversion experience and kind of saying how now I'm a devotee. It's a sweet thing that he did in such a humble way that it moved my heart, as knucklehead as I was in my college years, that caused me to consider the possibility of divinity. And this particular purport reminds me of the many places where Prabhupada writes a kind of autobiography of his own pastimes for those of us that can appreciate them without overtly calling attention to himself. He's speaking of himself when he talks about the devotee who cares not for the hellish condition or the heavenly situation, but is simply concerned with what can I do for my Lord. Prabhupada is speaking of himself without speaking of himself. He had this responsibility as the person bringing Krishna consciousness from a relatively small situation in India across the whole world. He had to somehow culture his own disciples to understand how to relate to him, how to worship him without emphasizing his own position. When I was considering this purport, I was thinking how awkward, and then just this morning it happened that I wound up singing Guru Puja. I was thinking how awkward it must have been for Prabhupada to teach his disciples how to offer Guru Puja. Imagine having to teach somebody how to worship you for their sake, not for your sake. Yourself thinking that you're not worthy of worship, but knowing that this is what's necessary for them, you teach them. And because of the humility in Prabhupada's heart, he's able to do that without setting off any alarms in the minds and hearts of those who are following him that, oh, this guy's just in it for the pratishta. He just wants the name and fame and he wants the adoration. Instead, by that act, it just created a deeper sense of connection to Krishna in the hearts of his disciples, because by worshiping the devotee, one comes closer to Krishna. And that's the emphasis of today's verse. I'll read it again. My dear king, if a sinful person engages in the service of a bona fide devotee of the Lord, and thus learns how to dedicate his life unto the lotus feet of Krishna, he can be completely purified. One cannot be purified merely by undergoing austerity, penance, brahmacharya, and the other methods of atonement I have previously described. So today, I'd love to hear from you assembled devotees. I prefer hearing more than speaking. The few things I'd like to touch on based on the verse in Srila Prabhupada's purport. One, we'll just try to address the value of brahmacharya and the other process of penance and atonement. I see a few folks in saffron, so it's a worthy thing to note. And maybe what is being indicated also by Shukadeva in reminding Parikshit that none of these have any value in and of themselves. Then I'd like to discuss what is it in finding that devotee which we can serve and surrender to. What are the something about the qualifications of such a person, and how we ourselves as aspiring bhaktas might be able to consider that when making that leap of faith, that taking that step of trust to be able to connect ourselves and serve in that way through surrender. And then I'll just share a few experiences from my own attempts at that to encourage you all. There's this dynamic of testimony that the Christians do very well. They don't have much of a philosophy, so they have to have something to attract people to their fold. And what they do is just tell people, they testify about their experience with Jesus. And at the end of the day, most people, that's what they're interested in, is what's this going to do for me? What has this done to affect your life, and how might it affect mine? So in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Sanatana Goswami also makes this point, that it's personal testimony which is the most convincing. This is the most effective way to share God consciousness, is by giving your personal experience. Srila Vyasadeva was famously chided by his spiritual master, Narad Muni, that you're sad and despondent and depressed because you haven't talked enough about Krishna. And this comes in the first canto, the very beginning of our Srimad Bhagavatam. But then ironically, Narad Muni does a very odd thing after chastising his dear disciple for a whole chapter about how he didn't glorify Krishna directly, and now that's why he's sad and depressed. What does Narad do immediately after that? Yeah, he talks about himself in the context of how he became Krishna conscious. He kind of shares his joining story. So we've all probably shared our joining stories many times. This is a favorite question to ask any devotee we meet for the first time. How'd you come? You always know there's going to be some nectar there. There's going to be some sweet exchange, some special thing that happens. How did you come? But sometimes the better question to ask is, how did you stay? How are you still here? Because there's many experiences in between that have kept us around also, not just the first one or the first few that brought us, but we're here now for a few days, a few months, a few years, a few decades. And so how did you stay? So I'll just try to share something of my own experience of this dynamic of the importance of serving the devotee and the opportunity that brings us. But first, I'd like to begin again with the kind of dismissal that Shukadeva is making here to Parikshit of the other things. One cannot be purified merely by undergoing austerity, penance, brahmacharya, and other methods of atonement I have previously described. It's a good thing for me that you don't have to be a brahmachari to experience the completion of purification. My spiritual master laughed at me when I asked if I could put on saffron. So I wouldn't have much open Krishna consciousness if that was a requirement. What is the value of the ashrams, whatever we might be in? What is the value of our austerity and atonement, whatever it might be? Dravida Prabhu quizzed me this morning if I had a shloka, and thankfully I did. Certainly not as many as he has, but there's this very sweet one from the 5th chapter. And Krishna is trying to help Arjuna understand what's the real goal of life, what's the real thing to look for. And for several chapters, several questions, Arjuna has been trying to get Krishna to tell him what he's already decided is true. 3rd chapter, 5th chapter, I don't know if you guys have ever done this with like your parents. You play both sides and you try to ask mom the right way and ask dad the both way and then piece together their answers so you get out of them what you want to hear. Right? Arjuna is trying to ask the question some way or other to get Krishna to tell him what he already thinks he knows, which is that I should just run away from this situation. This is too much. This is too ugly. It's too unbecoming. I don't want to deal with it. So now it's time to renounce. And Krishna is telling Arjuna in this 5th chapter, in the verse that I was thinking of, I shared with Dravida Prabhu this morning, he says, Sannyasas tu mahabaho dukam aptam ayogata. Sannyas, and this isn't the ashram of sannyas, but just the act. In renunciation, in the act of sannyas, all you get is suffering. Dukam aptam. If you are ayogata, if you're not thinking of how this act, whatever the act is, attachment or aversion, renunciation or attainment, whatever the act might be, if you're ayogata, then it's just going to be dukam that you get. And we all know the word dukam, suffering. However, yoga yukto munir brahma na chirain adigachati. If you can be a muni, this is a word sometimes we hear, Prabhupada derides the munis sometimes. In his purports, he famously says, the munis, they have to come up with something different to say. That's what qualifies them as a muni, is they have to make some new claim on some field of knowledge, and that's what gives them standing. So the mental speculators who juggle words just to make themselves look like munis, this is not the muni that Krishna is encouraging Arjuna to become. Still though, he's saying, be a thoughtful person. Yoga yukto munir brahma na chirain adigachati. that you attain adhigacchati, you attain me without delay as soon as you're thinking how to connect with me. As soon as that thought comes to one's heart and mind, then Krishna's present already. Nachare adhigacchati. But if all you're doing is worrying about hating Maya, getting away from the material energy, then you've got no time to think about how to connect to Krishna. So if your concern is just this sannyas, getting rid of and running away, then you don't have time to think about how to run towards Krishna. Running away from Maya is not necessarily running towards Krishna. So Arjuna's being encouraged to understand this by Krishna, that your particular situation as a kshatriya is such that if you run away from this battlefield, you're going to have no mind, no heart to think about anything but the shame that's going to come from you, that's going to occur to you when the battle is over. Because as a kshatriya, Arjuna, although faced so many battles and was triumphant in each of them, now he's on the battlefield of Kurukshetra and it's an awkward situation. Sometimes to help Western folks understand the crucible that the Bhagavad Gita is, I help them appreciate that Jesus was asked to accept his own death, but Arjuna is being asked to participate in the death of his grandfather. Arjuna is asked to participate in the death, to be a part of killing his family members. Which would you rather do, if given the choice? Participate in killing your family members or just accept your own death at the hands of some knucklehead villagers? Arjuna's got the harder road to walk in most people's eyes. So Krishna explains to him, it's all going to happen already. It's not that I need you to enact any particular thing on this battlefield. Those who are going to die are already dead. Why then is Krishna so insistent on Arjuna fighting? Why does he want Arjuna there on the battlefield and not hiding under a tree as some pseudo-renunciate brahmana like Arjuna had the idea to do? The reason is so that Arjuna himself can appreciate what's already going to happen. The plan that the Lord already has chalked out, Krishna wants Arjuna to be in the seat in the theater that he'll be most comfortable in, that he'll be able to recognize and have faith in and have appreciation and affection for what the Lord has done. And that's the value of any ashram. That's the value of any austerity. That's the value of any penance, any other kind of auxiliary religious principle we consider, any auxiliary religious detail of our life. The real value of it is that arrangement creates a conducive atmosphere for watching Krishna's Leela, Krishna's play. This verse that I ended my brief Mangalacharan with, Sri Chaitanya Prasadena Drisva Vraja Vilasani. This is how Krishnadas Kaviraj opens the Adi Leela 4th chapter, the beautiful chapter explaining the internal reasons for Mahaprabhu's appearance. He says, this is the real sign that you've gotten Mahaprabhu's mercy. The real sign you've gotten Mahaprabhu's mercy is that you have fixation on Dristva, like Dhruva was fixed, one thing. Dristva, you have this deep focus on the pastimes of Vrindavan, Krishna's Leela. This is our goal. I was just appreciating all these beautiful bas reliefs that are here in the temple, and Vaikuntha Prabhu was telling me something of the devotee who had made them. It was so sweet to sing Jai Radha Madhava and Yamuna Tira and Yashoda Nandana. There's Mother Yashoda and there's Nanda Nandana. And not hard to remember Krishna's pastimes here in the San Diego temple. So this is the goal. And if we're not situated properly in an ashram, if we don't have the right dynamic of penance and austerity in our life, then it becomes hard to focus on the pastimes of Krishna. It becomes hard to think about the Lord in our day-to-day activities. When we're in the right situation, it becomes easy, it becomes natural, because we're not overly exerting ourselves trying to figure out the circumstance of the material energy that's going to keep us peaceful. We're kind of doing what comes naturally, and after that, we focus on Krishna with the expense of our energy. So I learned the value of this. My own father, at one point, he was encouraged to become a business owner, as most people in America are encouraged to do. You should be an entrepreneur. the American dream to lift yourself up by your own bootstraps. And so my father thought to follow that at one point in our family's life. And that was the hardest 4 years of our family's life. Because my dad is an excellent brick mason, really good. And he would occasionally do side jobs and things on the weekends for other people. But when he had to run his own business, has anyone ever tried to do something like that, run your own business? Yeah, Prabhu. There's a lot, you're a masseuse, right, Prabhu? There's a lot more than offering good massages to being a personal masseuse, right? You have to find clients, you have to know what to charge them, you have to get rid of clients who are not working out. You have to hire employees, you have to fire employees, you have to file with paperwork, state, federal. So much other stuff that goes along with being your own business, aside from just the particular skill that you might be offering. And for my dad, when he took on all that extra stuff, it was a big headache. It was more than he was naturally inclined to be able to do. So his real skill of being a brick mason was undermined by all the other headaches that he had to take on, which were not so natural. So this is the value of our ashram. This is the value of our kind of external life, whatever it might be, whichever path we've chosen and are on, is that it creates a peaceful circumstance in our life to, with the bulk of the rest of our energy, focus on Krishna. And if with the bulk of the rest of our energy we're still anxious about what the material situation is, then that's not the right situation for us. So this is what we have to consider and take guidance from those that have walked a few more miles than us on the path, to understand where do we fit in with that. So that brings us to a nice transition. I see Lord Ram and Sita here, so I'm reminded of a little pastime in the Ramayana where Marichi, the demon, was encouraged by Ravana to go in front of Sita as the golden deer. And Marichi had an objection to that. Does anybody know or remember Marichi's objection as to why he should not go in front of Sita as the golden deer? Yeah, I don't want to, Ram's going to kill me like that. And Ravan had an answer to this objection. Yeah, I'll kill you if you don't go do it. So now Marichi is between a rock and a hard place. Either I get killed by Ram or I get killed by Sita. And now this is a demon, mind you. Oh yeah, thank you, Ravan. Either I get killed by Ravan or I get killed by Ram. So this is Marichi, he's a demon. And what was his logic at this point? What was his, as we know, he becomes the golden deer and the pastimes continue. What was the demon's logic? That's right. As he's taking the form of the golden deer, Ravan says, hey, I thought you were worried about getting killed by Ram. He said, yes, I am. But if I'm going to be killed anyway, better to be killed by Ram than by you. Better to be killed by the Lord than by the demon. So this I often think about in my own experience when I'm asking, where is that devotee that I can surrender to? Many, especially young people today, with the collapse of any integrity within society, it's so hard for young people to trust anyone. They don't even have parents they can trust. What to speak of strangers off the street or strangers who are part of a religious organization. It's such a high bar for the average Kali Yugan to be able to trust anyone. What to speak of trusting someone on an absolute level. So I think of this pastime often myself when my mind gets into that overly judgmental space of trying to evaluate and critique and weigh and measure which devotees are good and which devotees are bad. Who deserves my service and who deserves my scorn. We don't know when we're on a certain level, which I can say for myself I am. What I can know, though, is that if I'm offering with sincerity this effort to serve, this effort to take association, then I might be killed, I might be harmed, but the harm is coming from Ram and not Ravan. The harm is coming from Krishna and not my mind, not my false ego, not the unscrupulous entities that are out there trying to steal my attention. If I'm sincerely offering myself to the service of the Lord through the Lord's representatives who are the devotees, then I can be safe in whatever hardships come to me, whatever difficulties come from that. If I get killed by Ram, good. And maybe I don't also. That's also good. So this secret that Shukadeva is sharing with Parikshit now, after kind of giving him something of a quiz, giving him a little bit of a test, I'm sure that's been spoken about many times over the last few days in the previous verses. Shukadeva is seeing how much does Parikshit know. This test comes a few times in the Bhagavatam, actually in Srila Vishwanath's commentary. Just before the 10th canto begins, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives us a little insight that Parikshit Maharaj was sitting there with rapt attention. And we're at like day 4.5 now, day 5 in the timeline of the narration of the Bhagavatam. Parikshit hasn't had anything to drink, right? What to speak of eat or sleep. He hasn't even had anything to drink in almost 4.5 days. And he's a Raj, he's a king. You know, Shukadeva, this is par for the course. He's a total avadut. But this is a Raj used to having servants waiting on him hand and foot and beautiful ladies everywhere and everybody attending to his slightest need. Just days ago, he had gotten upset at a rishi in the woods for not offering him a glass of water after a few hours of hunting. And now he's sat there for 4.5 days, nirjal and jagran, no sleep. So Shukadeva says, my dear Parikshit, maybe now it's time for you to go take a nap. Maybe it's time for you to take a little refreshment. And Parikshit responds to this subtle pop quiz from Shukadeva and says, no. The only thing that is maintaining me is Krishna Katamritam coming from your lips. The only thing maintaining my life is this Amrit, this deathless nectar of Krishna's pastimes coming from your lips. So you keep that going and I'll be fine. If you stop that, then we'll have the problem. That's when I'll get agitated. So throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam, the conversation between Shukadeva and Parikshit, Shukadeva tests Parikshit's focus and attention and desire. And so here also that's happened. And Parikshit is rightly, as Prabhupada brings out also in his Nectar of Instruction purport, in the first verse, Vachavegam, Parikshit is rightly concerned about this idea of atonement, prayaschitya, and how it's not so effective. Elephant bath, as Prabhupada gave us the imagery of. The elephant goes in the water, washes off, and then comes right back out and starts chunking mud at its own face. Elephant bath. So the conditioned soul has this tendency to repent only to go out and do the same thing again. So Parikshit is rightly concerned about this, and Shukadeva appreciates his concern that he shares. And so now he's getting into the real heart of the situation, which is that through service to the devotee, real auspiciousness can be had. And as I mentioned, our mind is worried about who is the devotee, where is the devotee that I can serve in this way, that I can get from the thing what I need. And that idea itself kind of sabotages the dynamic of seva that creates the auspicious exchange between the devotee and the aspiring devotee. When we're too concerned in what's in it for me, then we miss out on what we have to get from the Vaiṣṇava. But this is the beauty of our Gaudiya Vaishnava culture, actually, is that rather than having a kind of means to an end philosophy towards the devotee, that I'll go to the devotee for a little while so I can get God, our philosophy kind of turns it on its head and says, you go to God so you can get the devotee. That's the real mercy of the Lord, is that you have the association of His bhaktas. Because in our heart, already God's there. There's no question of God being with us, but is the devotee there yet? That's the question. That's the missing piece for the jivas out there wandering, Brahmanda Brahmite. They have Bhagavan already in the heart, Paramatma. But who's not come in their life yet necessarily is the bhakta. So Narottam Das, in his famous Hari Haraya Nama Krishna Yadavaya Namaha, he expands that beautiful Nam Kirtan that Mahaprabhu also is said to chant in the streets. He expands it into a beautiful bhajan, and he glorifies the 6 Goswamis, and he glorifies the Panchatattva. And at the very end of that bhajan, he says, Shri Guru Vaiṣṇava Pada Padma Kori Ash, Nam Sankirtan Kohe Narottam Das. It's enigmatic for the lay spiritualist, you could say. What Narottam is saying here, Shri Guru Vaiṣṇava Pada Padma Kori Ash. My heart's ash, my heart's desire is the lotus feet of the Vaishnavas and my Guru, both. It's not just one person, not just group. Whomever is serving the Lord in a favorable way, I want their feet in my heart. Shri Guru Vaiṣṇava Pada Padma Koryash Nam Sankirtan Kohe Narottam Das. Therefore, I'm singing God's names. I'm singing God's names so I can get the association of God's devotees. It's paradoxical. It's inverted from the way it's usually presented. Go to the devotee to get God. Narottam is saying go to God to get the devotee. This is how you know you've gotten the Lord's mercy, is that you have the association of His dedicated souls. So, again, there's this issue, especially when we're young and apprehensive in our Krishna consciousness, who is those persons I can go to? So I'll just share one experience, a few experiences I had with one devotee named Ram Roy Prabhu, who's doing wonderful service in New York City, pushing on Harinam now for almost 11 years. Everybody familiar with the New York City Harinam, what's been going on there. So somehow I got connected with Prabhu very early on in 2012, when he had just started going out every day, Harinam in New York City for 4 hours, and I was inspired by that. And so he'd asked me, he said, he saw I was young and had my whole life open to me. I was, as Vaisheshika Prabhu said, open to suggestion. So he saw that I was maybe available. He said, you come here and just help me do this. And I would have, except that I just signed a lease in Ann Arbor for a little preaching center. And so I felt obliged to stay in Ann Arbor. But I was so moved by Prabhu's insistence on the importance of Harinam happening in New York City, where Srila Prabhupada started our movement. He had the strategy, of course, that if New York City, the kind of central hub of Maya, right there in Mordor, if we can make Krishna consciousness happen, then it'll affect the rest of the planet. So I was excited about that idea, and I told Prabhu I'd go there once a month. I'd go there a week out of every month. And so I started to do that. My first week there, we were leaving the Bhakti Center where he was staying at the time. And he has this big cart filled with all the harmonium and instruments and mats and things. And so I'm there, and I've got shaved head and dhoti, and I'm walking down the street. And these two gentlemen stop me. They say, hey, you a Hare Krishna? Yeah, I'm a Hare Krishna. And then I start chatting them up. They're like, yeah, this is great. New York City. I'm like, not used to this. I'm used to small town Michigan. Like, people see you're Hare Krishna and they walk the other way. And these guys are like walking up to me and asking questions. So I was like, okay, this is great. And so I start chatting to these guys on the corner. And then Ram Roy Prabhu, he's like walking ahead. And he turns around and he sees I've been, caught by these two guys. So he comes, he just grabs my arm. He says, come on. And immediately in my heart, I was like, hey, I thought we were out here to preach to the fallen conditioned souls. I thought we were here to, share Krishna consciousness with everyone. These guys have stopped me. They're asking questions. This seems like a very favorable situation. This is what we're here to do. What's the problem? And Ram Roy Prabhu could see that in my eyes. I was like, why not talk to these folks for a little while? And he said, come on, we got to get to the spot on time. And so that was his answer. But and I accepted. I was like, okay, I'm here. This is his place, his service. I'm new. Let me just, toe the line. But in my heart, I was still thinking, this is not good. These guys wanted to hear about Krishna. I've been asked to, I've been chosen by Krishna to speak to them. And now I'm being pulled away by this older devotee and his sensibilities, whatever they are. So this was going on in my head. And I was starting to get a little critical already, hours into my service there in New York. I'm pushing the cart, walking down First Avenue in New York City, and in the grips of these thoughts going through my head, my dhoti just completely falls off. Right there in the middle of New York City. And these were my Copen-wearing days. So I'm essentially just standing naked now in the middle of New York City. And I feel my dhoti fall completely off, and I drop down, catch it with my elbows, and shimmy it back up. And now I have to stop pushing the cart and start tying my dhoti awkwardly in the middle of New York City. And Ram Roy Prabhu, he's still ahead, and he turns back around to check my progress. And now he sees me trying to tie my dhoti. He just shakes his head and keeps walking. And so the rest of the 10-minute walk to Union Square, I get to think about what is the purport of me being stripped naked in the middle of New York City. And I appreciated that Krishna was showing me without the blessings and guidance of my seniors, I'm naked. I don't know anything. I think I know something. I think I know who needs to be spoken to and how they need to be spoken to and what needs to be done for Krishna. But really, I don't know much. And so I'm dependent on people like Ram Roy Prabhu. And if I don't pay attention, and he's not my guru, I was initiated by this point. He's not my spiritual master, but he's my spiritual master right now. He's the devotee that Krishna has put me with to inspire my service, to move my service, to guide my service. I've chosen to come all the way over here. But what does that mean that I've chosen? Am I doing something for him, or is he doing something for me? Who's getting more out of the equation here? Krishna helped me see that first day by pantsing me in the middle of New York City, that the situation isn't exactly what I think it is. And I'm going to have to get over my mind's apprehensions if I want my heart to receive the benefit that I think is here in this opportunity, in this circumstance. So then fast forward a bunch of years later, and we've been coming to help Ram Roy Prabhu for like 4 years now. And now we have an ashram, and there's a nice situation going on, and the Harinam has been increased to 6 hours a day. And so I was making one of my monthly visits there, and somehow out of nowhere, Ram Roy Prabhu says to me to go and check on the devotee who's sitting on the spot, because the spot has become like prime real estate in New York City. New York City real estate's a big deal. San Diego also real estate's a big deal, right? Where you have yourself situated makes a big difference in what your experience is going to be. So the devotees had been chanting in the same spot in Union Square for like 4 years. And that had attracted a certain energy there, and people like to set up in our spot, buskers, musicians and such. And so Ram Roy Prabhu, to head them off, would send one of the guys down like 4 or 5 hours before the Harinam would start, to sit there, chant their japa, read something, and make sure that nobody comes to take the spot. So I was just there visiting. Again, I'm not a regular part of the service. I'm just coming once a month for a week. And Ram Roy Prabhu says, go check on the guy at the spot. And it's like 8 in the morning. We don't go out for Harinam for like another 7 hours. And I've got my day planned. You know, I have my things I think I'm going to do before we go out on Harinam. And he says, go and check on the guy. Now in my head, I'm thinking, that guy has done this every day for the last 6 months without me here. Why do I have to suddenly go check on the guy? He's got his routine. He knows what he's doing. He told me, go check on him in case he needs some prasad or needs to go to the bathroom. I was thinking, he's been figuring out how to go to the bathroom and take prasad for the last 6 months without me. Why does he suddenly, need my help? Just seemed totally unnecessary. But at this point, I'd learned my lessons, and I just knew, okay, it's being asked. Something's there. Something there's an opportunity here from Krishna. I don't know what it is, but we'll go find out. So I tell my mind to shut up, and I get on the train. It's like 45 minutes. We get over to the spot, and sure enough, I get there, and the devotee looks at me like, what are you doing here? And he says, Ram Roy Prabhu told me to come and check on you. He said, yeah, I'm okay. There was no need, because as I knew, the devotee had figured out his routine over the last 6 months that he'd been doing this. But just at that moment where I was having my own mind vindicated that, yes, see, this is totally useless and pointless, and now I'm in the middle of Manhattan in the middle of the morning for no good reason. Just at that moment, this young man walks up, and he says, hey, you guys Hare Krishnas? And I say, yeah. And he says, wow, I can't believe my luck. I just got out of prison. And in prison, I got this Bhagavad Gita. And I read it all the way through, and I've been wanting to meet you guys. And here you are, the first day that I'm out. Do you know where I can get some prasadam? Like, this guy's been paying attention to this book. He's never spoken with the devotees, but he knows I need to meet the devotees and I need to eat that food. So at that moment, I recognized the opportunity in Ram Roy Prabhu's instruction. Go to check on this guy, but I wasn't going to help this devotee take prasadam. I was going to help another devotee take prasadam. And it became very clear to me in that moment. And it so happened that day was a Wednesday. And on Wednesdays, Mondays, and Fridays, there's a wonderful Prabhupada disciple named Adi Purusha Prabhu. And for 30 years plus, he's been going to Tompkins Square Park, the famous park where Srila Prabhupada had one of the first Harinams in New York City that made it onto the famous cover of the Village Voice back in 1966. Adipurusha Prabhu has been serving prasadam at Tompkins Square Park for a solid 30 years. Same time every day, 10:45. And there'll be a line of people waiting, a good 100 or so folks, mostly from Chinatown. And Adi Prabhu will serve them cake, khichdi, and salad. And they love it. He'll pack them as much as somebody wants to take, that much he'll give them. And so it was a Wednesday, and it was like 9:45-ish when this person came to us, and I knew, okay, let's introduce you to Adi. If you're going to be in New York City, you can go help him every day. He'll feed you 3 days a week. You can go help him cook and do the serve out. And sure enough, this devotee got connected. This young man coming out of prison got connected with Adipurusha Prabhu, just because I got over myself a little bit and had learned my lessons through trial and error to follow the thing even if you don't know why you're following the thing. Because that sense of surrender to the will of the person who you're giving the benefit of the doubt as Krishna's devotee, that brings auspiciousness into the mind and heart of any conditioned soul who's willing to take that gamble, willing to take that bet. So that's my thoughts to share when encountering these verses that encourage us to associate with the pure souls, the Narayana Parayanas. If we're not one ourselves, it's hard to effectively weigh and discern who to care and who not to care about. Rather, just in a mood of service, approach all of the devotees with that sense of deference, and Krishna will work out the details for us to be able to be well situated and guided. So I'll stop there and just see now if there's any reflections or comments. Hopefully the seniors...
Hare Krishna.
Okay, there's inside questions, and then we're going to hear from this Vijay Krishna Prabhu. Okay.
Yes, I can wait, no problem.
Akashvani.
He's quite accommodating.
Okay.
I have a question, but I want to see if the other devotees have questions first. But just because you asked us to share, and you were talking about, the awkwardness of Srila Prabhupada showing us how to worship him, although he's humility personified. And because it's also Detroit, Govardhan Prabhu was our temple president. I can never repay the man. He heard that in Los Angeles they'd bathe Prabhupada's feet. He thought, this is fantastic. We'll do it too. But we didn't really get all the details or exactly how to do it. So just I'll be quick. But okay, Govardhan's thinking, well, we got to have something to catch. Prabhupada's sitting on the Vyasa-san. You got a room packed full of devotees and like that. What to do? So he sent me out to the Kmart. We used to call it Krishna Mart. It used to be Walmart, and now it's Walmart. But anyway, we zipped out there. I got the only thing I could find, and in my little pea brain, we got a kiddie pool, swimming pool. To this day, it was blue with pink ducks all around it. So I remember, suddenly we got the whole thing set up. Govardhan came out with the milk and the flower petals and the whole thing. And so, Prabhupada could see what we were going to do. Govardhan showed, I came out with a swimming pool, put it by the Vyasa, right here. So Prabhupada said, okay, he put his feet out, first. Govardhan's just about to pour the milk from the conch. Prabhupada said, socks off. Socks off. Note to self. I remember Govardhan thinking, that would not be, we were going to bathe his feet with his socks on. So then we took Prabhupada's socks off. Then he got ready to bathe, and the milk had just come out of the fridge.
Oh, this is freezing.
And Prabhupada was very sensitive, so he poured this ice-cold milk, and Prabhupada pulled his feet. Whoa, okay, heat the milk next time. So just through the whole thing, and there's many, many incidences, like Prabhupada had to show us. And it was not an easy thing, because if there was a wrong turn, we took it. So I just wanted to share that about Prabhupada's humility of, they think, oh, he's sitting on the big seat, but it's not that easy.
Thank you.
I'll see if the other devotees have questions.
Wonderful.
Then I got one this time.
I have a question, but I just wanted to make one comment on your insight and reflection how you pray to Krishna to get the association of devotees. You meet a devotee, of course, he introduces you to Krishna, and I thought of this verse, and Dhruva Maharaj chanted, because he has a famous verse, Swamin Katartani, I don't want anything else now that I have you. But this one's in the Bhagavatam, 4:9-11, and he's glorified the Lord. Vishnu comes down on Garuda, the whole story. And he goes into ecstasy. There's a whole scene there where and then he's praying, And one of the prayers is exactly what you described. I'm not going to. I'll read the first line of the Sanskrit. Bhakti mahupavatam mahitroy me pasango. And he says, "O unlimited Lord, kindly bless me, so that I may." So he says, "Forget the kingdom. I don't want the kingdom. Kindly bless me so that I may associate with great devotees who engage in your transcendental loving service constantly, just as the waves of a river constantly flow." Such transcendental devotees are completely situated in an uncontaminated state of life. By the process of devotional service, I shall surely be able to cross the nascent ocean of material existence, which is filled with waves of blazing, fire-like dangers. Somehow that image always struck me. It will be very easy for me, for I am becoming mad to hear about your transcendental qualities, pastimes, which are eternally existent. And that's where you can really hear the nectar, That's what Prabhupada did. He gave us all these books, and he's giving his association, It's such a wonderful thing. But that's a great insight, that the greatest prayer is that just let me have association with devotees.
Thank you, Prabhu. You're reminding me that in the Lord Shiva's song that he gives the Prachetas, that's also there, that he says, my Lord, I think your real mercy is the association of your devotees, so please give that to me.
Thank you for a wonderful class. It was very insightful.
Gauranga.
And I like that you began with your time in college. I had a lot of insights in the library as well.
Okay. Yeah. The stacks.
Dravida had a good point. I like that takeaway. We pray to Krishna to be with the devotees. Very nice. And also, when a devotee asks you to do something, to not let your mind get in the way of it. See it as, there might be more to the story here. Let's go see what Krishna has, not just X, Y, Z. Let's go see what's in store. What you read from the Bhagavatam, there was a sentence there which is a list, and it ends with brahmacharya. Do you remember where that's at?
Yeah, the verse is, one cannot be purified merely by undergoing austerity, penance, brahmacharya, and other methods of atonement.
So I want to ask you a question, but what do you think he's defining as brahmacharya in that sentence?
Well, let's go to the Sanskrit and see if that was Puyeta. Yeah, so Srila Prabhupada is elaborating on, he's fleshing out, you could say, what tapa looks like. And tapas, the first austerity in any cultured community, what to speak of in the Vedas, is restraint of sexual desire.
Okay.
And Prabhupada has many quotes on this, as you've probably heard also, that even a grihasta, as long as they're maintaining themselves in the proper way, then they're as good as a brahmachari, or even some... Right, he used that phrase. So, okay. And even said it's in some ways more noble because it's harder to maintain that in such an ashram. So sexual purity is a kind of baseline for material stability per our version, that the mind is not agitated. And so that looks at different phases for different people at different times of their life, but to always recognize that that is a sign of one's maturity and advancement, is that there becomes a disinterest in sex life. That's kind of the principle. And then the practice of brahmacharya, that looks different for different people at different phases of their life. But the principle is that a diminishment in sexual desire is a sign of spiritual advancement. And it's really not possible without spiritual advancement.
I was really hoping that was the definition, because we're so fortunate to have a brahmacharya ashram here, and I was hoping it wasn't the ashram, it was the actual definition of it in terms of celibacy. Yeah, so thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. I mean, because we're so compelled by our material senses, whatever ashram we're in, that's meant to make our endeavors ashrama. Shrama means useless, and ashram means not useless. So that context within which your natural endeavors become worthy and valuable, supportive of your spiritual development, that's your ashram. So the ashram of brahmacharya is, you all have a beautiful expression of it here. It takes as much camaraderie as it takes for a family. the ashram of the brahmacharis and the sense of connection and purpose and trust they have in each other, it's the same that grihastas have together. And so one way or another, you need that support and that sangha and that sense of identity as a part of a unit. And you get that either in a healthy brahmachari ashram or you get it in a healthy grihasta ashram. But in either case, you're looking for that wholesome support to diminish your need for like unwholesome things.
That's why those takeaways are so profound here, because we're praying to Krishna directly, and we're in the association of wonderful devotees, and they ask us to do stuff all the time. So it's really quite
nice
wonderful. Yeah. So you've actually inspired me. Thank you so much.
Gauranga.
Yeah. So
He's regularly fully engaged.
You're the guy asking all the other guys.
Yeah. I get complaints on one side and projects on the other, but I'm
Nice.
learning. Yeah. So I'm learning, and this is great instruction. So
Wonderful.
Thank you. Very well.
Thank you for taking on that responsible position.
One more 5-second point out.
Oh,
But
please.
the answer to his question is 3 verses back.
Okay.
Because Shukadeva is referring to what he just said. Tapasa brahmacharyena tapa adibi. You just go back 3 verses, you'll read about all that and he's rejecting it. So forget it, forget that. It's associated with devotees.
Do we let Vijay go at it because of the time?
Okay, Hariva. Just one comment. When you mentioned that we want the association of devotees and everything, also you read that in those prayers over and over, in all scriptures, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Bhagavatam, the devotees never say, please Lord, take me back to the spiritual world. They always pray, please let me associate with your devotees and serve you life after life. So the devotee doesn't really care about the destination. I mean, obviously we want to aspire to go back and solve this material situation, and most of us think like that. I just want to get out of this world. I don't want any more suffering. But when the devotees reach that level of purity, they don't really care. They're like, I just want to associate with your devotees, serve you life after life. Wherever you send me, wherever I go, that I'm happy with it, as long as I have this opportunity to be with the devotees and to serve you.
Yes, well said. The only place Krishna talks about happiness in the whole Gita is when he's speaking about what happens when devotees share their realizations with one another. Machita matkata prana bodhayantas parasparam katayantas chamandityam tusyanticha ramanticha. Where does that ramanti we're all looking for actually happen? It happens in the association of devotees. Prabhupada, in the word for word, says preaching to one another. So this opportunity, we think to preach, again, we think to bring people in, but how do we keep people in? It's by sharing with one another our realizations and experiences that we've had in our service to the devotees and to Krishna. So that, and then as you're pointing out, Prabhu, the heart is satisfied and looks for nothing else except more opportunities to do that. Wherever you might be circumstantially, if you're with the devotees sharing realization, then that's Vrindavan.
I think Maharaj had one more comment. Did you have one more comment, you said?
I have a question. I wonder if we should let it ride with Vijay.
Okay. We call it Zoom land.
Oh, yeah, sure.
No. We were saying maybe we let Zoom land. He's a perennial question.
It'll be there tomorrow.
It's his Krishna enthusiasm.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you, Vijay Krishna. Haribol.
He'll be all right.
Granth Raj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shrada Giridhari ki jai. Vanchakalpadurvishya Kripasinubhya Vachapatitanam Pavanebhyo Vaiṣṇavebhyo Namo Namaha.